Where are the 2018-2019 Carolina Hurricanes now? We finish that conversation today in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of this Thursday afternoon. We hope you have been having a great off season. And this is part 3 of Where Are the 2018-2019 Carolina Hurricanes. We've had fun diving through the roster and talking about, where that playoff team is. They ended that decade-long playoff drought, and we're going to finish that conversation today. So enjoy, folks. But, moving on to the defensemen. We're going to start with the third untouchable member of the Hurricanes core, and that is Jaccob Slavin. He was his usual self in 2018, 2019, and he has just continued to get better year after year. Just doing Jaccob Slavin things. It's the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. So, no big deal there. He has 2 years left on his contract as of right now. Obviously, at the end of next season, he is going to be getting a very, very nice contract extension to lock him up long term. And I believe with his age, that may lock him up to essentially retire a Hurricane. Yeah, he's 29 years old as of recording. So say he signs an 8-year deal, whatever. That pretty much ensure that he retires a Hurricane at that point, which is what I think is definitely going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this just because we've talked so much about Jaccob Slavin, but it was kind of cool, this year when the Hurricanes finally got good, got into the playoffs, got more relevant, to see the larger hockey world, finally taking a notice of, oh, hey, this Jaccob Slavin guy, he's like really, 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 really good. So yeah, that was kind of fun to see that year.
Yeah, it was really fun. And like I said, he just continues to get better year after year after year. Team MVP year after year. My preseason pick for team MVP this year. Absolutely phenomenal. Future Hurricanes Hall of Famer. Does everything he needs to do for this team. Next up, Brett Pesce, another really big part of this team. He mainly played with Justin Falk that year, and he has continued to be one of the biggest bargain defensemen in the NHL. And he's under contract with the Hurricanes for 1 more year, but as we've talked about a lot this offseason, we could very much see him getting traded soon, which will suck because he is really stinking good for this team and has been for how many years has he been in the league at this point? He he's
8 years.
Something like that. He's been so good for this team. So it would definitely suck to see him go if and when that happens. But man, yeah, he's been an incredible part of this team and was then back in 2018, 2019. And, very much, like some of these other guys that have gotten drafted by the Hurricanes and had to deal with some of the bad years to see them, the fruits of their labor get rewarded has been really, really nice. Pesce, Slavin, Aho, Stahl, those guys that had to deal with those crap years. It's really nice to see them get rewarded this way.
Well, yeah, and you had seen, even in the years prior, when things didn't go the Hurricanes' way, you still saw Jacob Slavin and Brett Pesce growing into really, really good foundational pieces as young top 4 defensemen. So yeah, to see it, finally come together and them get to, make that playoff debut that year was really cool.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. Now, another massive fan favorite, and one that some folks are still salty about that the Hurricanes let him walk, and that is Dougie Hamilton. He was the prize offseason acquisition for that season. Big statement being made. We talked about that before, of him being like the really big like first move that this new regime made. Like, oh, things are different now. It's not Kermanos and Francis running the show anymore. You got folks in place that want this team to win, or are not not going to be satisfied with the status quo. And this really showed it. It had a slow start to the year, but ended up settling in and played very well. You kind of figure that with new players. You see that quite often, regardless of the sport. Sometimes it takes guys a while to settle in. And he played very, very well. Scored a few goals against Washington, but not great in the playoffs. Had an incredible Norris caliber year in the following season, 2019-2020. But ended up breaking his leg in a game against Columbus. I believe it was in Columbus. He totally could have won the Norris that year. Absolutely phenomenal season. Ended up coming back for the bubble. And he ended up playing one more year for the Hurricanes, but then ended up signing with the New Jersey Devils for 7 years at $9 million AAV. He was one of those guys that really put this team on the path to where they are now. And he's a guy that had they kept him around in free agency, none of us would be mad. He could still work in the Hurricane system. No one's going to say he couldn't. We all saw what he was capable of, but it just wasn't the way the Hurricanes wanted to go at the time. And he's another one that they're not going to reacquire him. But he's one of those guys where if when Brent Burns retires, if they don't really have anything lined up to put beside Jacob Slavin, they're able to make that trade and make it work salary wise. Not one we'd be opposed to. But yeah, Dougie Hamilton, what he did for this team, he was a fan favorite for a freaking reason. He was great for this team in his time here. Absolutely great.
Yeah, one of the best, if not the best, offensive two-way defensemen the Hurricanes have ever had. Mm-hmm. Again, you talk about putting them on the map. I mean, Dougie Hamilton is an elite player. So for them to go out and get that kind of guy, and again, that whole trade as a whole, signified we're not just going to, keep what we have and tinker around the edges, because what we have had hasn't been good enough. So they made a big splash. They made a big shakeup with that trade, and it worked out really well. The other guy who was playing, in the top 4 on the right side for the Hurricanes was Justin Falk. That was his last season with the Hurricanes. He was a longtime Hurricane, one of the biggest dark days holdovers. He had a good season, scored one of the most iconic Hurricanes playoff goals with that breakaway out of the box against the Islanders. I genuinely was worried for the structural integrity of PNC Arena's roof when that goal was scored. He was traded to the Blues the next year. He signed a long-term extension. He's still there. He's played well for the Blues. Just like I said, Justin Falk was drafted by the Hurricanes in, I think, 2010. Ended up making his debut in like 2011-12. So he was there for most of the playoff drought. Got unfairly scapegoated a lot because he really was a good player for the Hurricanes. So I'm always going to be really, really glad that before he moved on, Justin Falk got to experience a playoff run with the Hurricanes. I think that's a really cool thing, and I'm really glad that it happened.
Yeah. Like I said, with so many of these guys that are still here, but these guys that aren't here anymore, that were like Justin Falk, that were finally able to get that playoff run. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, like you said, that breakaway goal, phenomenal. That is top 3 goals in Hurricanes history, in my opinion. That was absolutely insane highlight reel goals that's one that's going to be played 20 years from now in like Hurricanes video hype packages. Like that is, great goal. Folks, football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. So if you're like Andrew picking the Kansas City Chiefs, you got a good chance of winning some bonus bets there, folks. But, we'll see what will happen this year. So just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So right now, visit fanduel.com/locked on and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's fanduel.com/locked on. Calvin DeHaan is next up. He ended up signing a free agent contract, played well at the start of the year, but as no surprise, and that's no disrespect to him, he ended up getting hurt, shoulder injury. Ended up coming back in the playoffs, traded to Chicago in the offseason. Ended up coming back this past season, started on PTO, signed that 1-year deal. He was kind of the number 6, number 7 defenseman, and now down with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Served his role well, did what he needed to do. Again, injuries have definitely been something that has haunted him throughout his career, with the Hurricanes, with Chicago, I believe with New York as well. He had some New York Islanders had some issues up there as well with injuries. So we'll see how things go for him. But yeah, he's just a depth guy. Yeah, did what he needed to do, did it all right,
Yeah, I think he signed with the Hurricanes, top 4 defensive defenseman. I mean, he was a really good player. Unfortunately, those shoulder injuries, shoulder surgeries can be tough to come back for him. I don't think he was ever the same after that. The Hurricanes end up, trading him in kind of a cap clearing move just 1 year into that 4-year contract. Cool that he got to come back and, be a part of this last year's team. And he's still, plugging away as that valuable, veteran 6'7" defenseman in the NHL. He's with the Tampa Bay Lightning now. So, good for him. Signs with another good team. Great guy. Wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely phenomenal guy. Next up, we have Trevor Van Riemsdyk, TVR, another fan favorite here. Bottom pairing defenseman, ended up playing really well for the Hurricanes. Had a huge goal late in the regular season to force overtime in a very important home game against the Montreal Canadiens. Played for one more year with the Hurricanes. I remember in that following year, kind of took him a while to get going due to is either a shoulder or back injury. I'm not sure which one it was, but yeah, he stayed for that one more year. Ended up signing with the Capitals in free agency that offseason, still with Washington to this day. Did what he needed to do for the Hurricanes well. No complaints there.
Yeah, you talk about that goal. I remember it was late March, part of the Hurricane stretch run. Montreal was the team. They ended up getting the first wild card at the end of the season, but for most of that stretch run, they were battling Montreal for the second wild card, and they were playing them at home. The Hurricanes had the wild card, but obviously if Montreal won it in regulation, I think they would have been like a point back, would have been much more uncomfortable. The Hurricanes, if I remember right, they played a lackluster second period. They were down 1-0 late in the third, throwing everything they could at Carey Price. Couldn't get one by him. Yeah. Finally, Van Riemsdyk ends up just letting go like a seeing eye shot from the point through traffic with like 5 minutes left. Beats Price, ties the game, and Andrei Svechnikov ends up winning it in overtime. Like we said, a huge win for the Hurricanes in that stretch run, that playoff race. And they don't even get an opportunity to get a point if Trevor Van Riemsdyk doesn't score that goal.
Yeah, I know, and obviously wishing him the best with Washington as well. Again, he's been there for a minute, but still, great guy. Yeah, if you ever got to talk to him.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
awesome guy.
yeah, and next up, another phenomenal guy to talk to, fan favorite Hayden Fleury. We talked about him before this offseason when it came to some draft picks. But it's yeah, it sucks that things panned out for him the way they did. But it is what it is. 6'7" defenseman in the regular season and playoffs. He played great against Boston in the bubble in 2020, and that was kind of his peak. Uh, but and that sucks at what it was, because he was a guy that had a lot of potential that just kind of didn't live up to it. I know Rod Brind'amour really loved him, which is kind of why I thought, okay, maybe they'll continue to work with him, continue to mold him. That wasn't the case. Ended up getting traded to the Anaheim Ducks for Yanni Hakanpää in that weird realigned season. Then was claimed by Seattle in the expansion draft, really to no surprise considering Ron Francis is the GM there. And he drafted Hayden Fleury. We kind of figured that was going to happen there. He ended up signing, and then they hardly ever played him. But then he ended up signing with Tampa this past offseason, still there as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it sucks, that he wasn't able to live up to the potential that a lot of people saw in him. But the fact that he is still in the NHL and still, he's kind of that extra defenseman role at this point, but he's still in the NHL, and that says a lot. Same with a lot of
Yeah.
these guys that we've talked about today.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Hayden Fleury never lived up to his draft billing, never developed into that consistent top four defenseman. I think we can say that now. I mean, he's been with the Hurricanes, Kraken, Ducks, Lightning in a short span, and all of them have deemed him either, expendable or not a lineup regular. So kind of is what he is. But you can, fall short of your draft billing as a top pick and still carve out a good professional career, which is exactly what Hayden Fleury has done. So good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And that does it for the defenseman. And it's crazy, I mean, we obviously are still going to get into the goalies, but just to have looked through this roster and just like the names that were here. We talked about it at the start of breaking down this roster of just how many guys are not here anymore. I believe it's 7 guys, 8 if you count Martin H's, but didn't really play a whole lot that year. But man, it's crazy to think about just the names they had on this roster and what they were able to do because, like you said, they did not have the depth that they have today. And it's crazy to think about. Now, moving on to the goalies, going to mention one that is not on the list. And the only reason I mention him is because, he was, I believe he's called up, as the extra, and he's on the back of like the playoff search. So I'm going to mention him anyway, whether you like it or not, Andrew. And that is Alex Nedeljkovic because I love him. Obviously he had that Calder caliber season, and that realigned season was great for him. Ended up getting traded to the Detroit Red Wings, signed up there.
And exposed.
Been up and down up there. He's had some really good performances, had some not so good performances. Now signed with the Pittsburgh Penguins on a one-year deal. In the game that me and my dad went up to in Detroit to see him play, he won and got the first star against the Hurricanes. So, he can still play. And
that was the peak of his Red Wings career.
Shut up, Andrew. Going on to Peter Mrazek. He was absolutely a huge part of getting this team to the playoffs. He took a chance coming here to be a number 1 goalie. He was great in the Washington series, hurt against the Islanders, came back against the Bruins. Good, but not as good in the 2019-2020 season. the aforementioned Calder season that Ned had in 2020, 2021. Peter was great when he was healthy, but that was the problem there. When he was able to play, he was great. He had that like really gruesome thumb injury. Ended up signing with the Maple Leafs that offseason. Was really bad in Toronto, and then now I believe he is still currently with Chicago. And this is really shows how the Hurricanes system can really help goalies. Uh, and because he was great for the Hurricanes, but you look at where he was and where with other teams prior to the Hurricanes and then after the Hurricanes, really just shows the Hurricane system and how well it works. And don't you
Yeah,
dare say Ned was part of the system.
he was part of the system. He was absolutely part of the system.
All right, I'm kicking you from
It's
the
pretty
stream.
pretty clear.
Yeah, I know.
No, I mean, I think both those guys from that short, Peter Mrazek and Alex Nedeljkovic, I mean, kind of the poster children for what people talk about in terms of the Hurricane system benefiting goalies. You look at Mrazek's numbers from before he was with the Hurricanes, his last year, I think with the split between the Red Wings and Flyers. You look at his numbers since. You look at Nedeljkovic's numbers that season. Now, I think there might be a little bit more of a happy medium for Nedeljkovic because like the Hurricanes defense was elite and the Red Wings defense was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
So, but we're not here to talk about Alex Nedeljkovic because he really wasn't much. No,
No,
I will
no.
say, Alex, in that stretch run, I think there was a point where like guys were hurt or what either Mrazek or Malcolini were hurt, and Nedeljkovic actually had to make a start and won it. And every point was at a premium in that stretch run. So I'll give you, I'll throw you a bone there. Alex Nedeljkovic helped the Hurricanes get 2 of those points in that stretch run that helped them make the playoffs, as a really, unproven guy. So that was impressive for him. I will give him
For
that.
him.
No. I mean, what I mean by that is like he's a guy who was coming up from the AHL in the middle of the season, playing for a team that is fighting tooth and nail to make the playoffs, a pressure-packed environment, and he plays well and gets the win. So that I'm just saying that's an impressive performance for him.
I know. But yeah, getting back to Peter Mrazek, in his time, with the Hurricanes, he definitely was a bit of a product. Well, not a bit. He was a product of the Hurricane system. But even as a product of the Hurricane system, he did have that one down year. But you really could not have asked for better. Yeah, he really gave them some stability and quality goaltending that they had not had for a long time since Cam Ward's prime had ended and he had kind of gone downhill and didn't have any quality backups, was having to play hurt, getting overplayed. So the fact that they're able to get that quality goaltending, that was great for them. And I remember opening night of that 2019-2020 season against Montreal. I remember, heading into that game, there was all the drama, because of the offer sheet stuff over the off season, and ended up going to shootout, and Peter stood tall and got him the win. And he was great for the Hurricanes in his time here. Does he ever come back? Nope. I don't think that would end up working now. But what are your thoughts on Peter Mrazek and what he did that season in his time here?
Yeah, we talked about this when we talked about, I think I called him an honorable mention for best free agent signings of all time, because the Hurricanes, you got to remember, going into that offseason, first offseason for Dom Waddell and Rod Brind'amour, they let Cam Ward walk, and they had Scott Darling coming off his abysmal first and only full season as a Hurricane. So they went out and signed Mrazek in free agency, and you're kind of like, it's another project. Like, he was bad the year before. You're hoping he bounces back to previous levels, but he did. I mean, and you look at the Hurricanes for the past, the last few years of that playoff drought, as they were getting better, they were kind of the joke was that they were the Corsi Canes because they couldn't finish. But part of that also was they were dominating possession in games, but had like one of the worst team save percentages in the league. And I remember, a lot of those years people said, if the Hurricanes could just get league average goaltending, they'd make the playoffs. And Mrazek provided that. As I said, he was a, fun personality, fan favorite. Obviously, everybody remembers the iconic moment of his "Yes, we are in" on the bench interview with Mike Maniscalco after that playoff clinching win over the New Jersey Devils, the last home game of the regular season. Played very well in the wins against Washington. Got hurt against the Islanders. Curtis McElhinney, who we'll talk about in a little bit here, ends up stepping in. But the one other Mrazek moment I want to talk about that I feel like has been forgotten, the Hurricanes were playing, again, one of those like February, March stretch run games, I think in Florida. And the game was in overtime. And the Florida was coming down the ice. And Mrazek like flew out of the crease to stop like either an odd man rush or breakaway with his stick, like stop them from getting to the puck. And I remember too, like seeing the video or hearing about it after the game, that after Mrazek did that, Justin Williams was sitting on the bench and he was like, "This game is ours now, boys." And like very shortly after that, Sebastian Aho won the game in overtime. So yeah, a lot of fun, iconic moments from Peter Mrazek in that first season. And again, the Hurricanes don't bring him in, don't get the level, because look, we're talking about him as a product of the system, but like the guy, like they needed him to just like make the saves, like make some saves, make some timely, difficult saves, make some routine saves that they really had not been able to get for years from either, Cam Ward, Eddie Lack, Scott Darling, whoever. And he was able to do that. And they don't make the playoffs if they don't get the level of improved goaltending they got from Mrazek and the next guy we're about to talk about.
Yeah, and that is something, when people say a player, regardless of the sport, is a product of the system, regardless of whether they're a product of the system or not, they are still doing said things, whether it be,
you still have to play well,
exactly.
Right?
You still have to play well. And,
right.
he still, made all the saves that he made, and absolutely phenomenal for what he did when he was here. And next up is Curtis McElhinney. Ended up being a waiver wire pickup for the Hurricanes. Huge part of the season. Calm veteran backup. He was really, really great in that series against Islanders where the Hurricanes swept them when Mrazek went down. Ended up signing with Tampa Bay, winning back-to-back Stanley Cups there, backing up Andrei Vasilevsky, and then played there until this last season. Now is retired. Yeah, I remember at the time when Mrazek came back, it was because McElhinney had played so well. It's like, crap, who do they play? Do they put Mrazek back in, or do they keep rolling with McElhinney? Because he was playing so stinking good for them, and he was again just what they needed at the time.
Yeah, no, exactly. He has said he was a very calm It was kind of a perfect tandem with him and Mrazek, because you have Mrazek as like, the fired up, like, like I said, flying out to make poke checks with his stick, like getting all fired up in the locker room and on the bench and in interviews, exciting, energetic guy. And you had McElhinney as just that very calm, steady veteran presence.
Yeah.
I said waiver wire pickup in training camp because Scott Darling ended up getting hurt, played very well. I remember Scott Darling came back and it was like very clearly or apparent very quickly of like, hey, you need to like get this guy out of here and let Mrazek and McElhinney beat the goalies. And credit to them. That's what they did. Scott Darling eventually put on waivers, sent down to the AHL, I think called up for one more game and then never again. And I said, it was the Mrazek and McElhinney show. We talked about too with him. What?
Eminem.
Yep. There you go. I thought you said something else.
No.
But he, like I said, he was great. I mean, that was part of what was good about that tandem was the Hurricanes could rely on both of them. They didn't have to overwork Mrazek, in that stretch run. They could. The game against Montreal that I'm talking about, huge game late in the season, that we talked about that Trevor Van Riemsdyk scored to tie it in regulation, and Andrei Svechnikov won it in overtime. Because I remember going back and looking at that game not that long ago. Curtis McElhinney was the Hurricanes goalie of record in that game. So they were able to trust him with big starts, and that ended up paying off big time in the playoffs. Because like we talked about, that second game against the New York Islanders, Peter Mrazek got hurt. McElhinney comes in, finishes that game that the Hurricanes end up coming back and winning. Is in net for the 2 wins at home against the Islanders. That ends up giving the net back to Mrazek in the Bruins series, but the Hurricanes as a whole had just kind of run out of gas at that point. But yeah, no, Curtis McElhinney, awesome guy. I said it was really cool that, he was able to go from the Hurricanes to the Lightning, end up, winning 2 Stanley Cup rings as a backup goalie in that role. I said, phenomenal guy, always great to talk to. Really smart hockey guy. I mean, he'd been in the league for a long time. He'd been with a lot of teams before the Hurricanes. He was kind of that veteran journeyman type. I mean, I can remember seeing the Hurricanes go against him, I think, in 2009, not in the playoffs, but in the regular season, like the last year that they made the playoffs. So well-traveled guy, ends up, making a big impact with the Hurricanes being one of those stops. Wish him nothing but the best in retirement. Polish those Stanley Cup rings, my friend.
Yeah, no, definitely more Stanley Cup rings than you and I will ever get. Drafted in 2002 by Calgary in the 6th round, with the 10th pick in the 6th round, 176th overall. Played for Calgary in 07-08 through 2009-2010, and spent 2 years at Anaheim. 1 year in Ottawa, 1 year in then Phoenix. Spent 4 years with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Then spent 2 with Toronto, the 1 with the Hurricanes, and then his final 2 years with the aforementioned Tampa Bay Lightning. Played 249 career games. Yeah. Great guy. I'm not going to dive into the remaining stats. Or actually, I will. 12 shutouts, 0.907 save percentage, 2.83 goals against. So yeah, definitely polish up those Stanley Cup rings, my friend, because more than you and I will ever have, like I said. But yeah, that was the entirety of the 2018-2019 roster. Again, we stuck more to the playoff side of things. Yeah, mentioned a couple guys that played in the regular season, but this is the roster right here that most folks will remember. They don't remember Victor Rask was on that team. They don't remember that, they remember Nino Niederreiter as being a part of that team, not Victor Rask. That's why, we stuck with this team. But if there's other guys, from that year that end up getting traded or whatever, let us know. Tweet at us, on Twitter at LO_Hurricanes, myself on Twitter at Jared Ellis _96, Andrew on Twitter at ASchnitt53. Comment down on YouTube in the YouTube comments as well. We had a lot of fun doing this. This was really fun. And if there are any other teams, from Hurricanes past that you want us to dive into, see where those folks' careers ended up going, let us know. Again, tweet at us on the socials, and we will talk to you guys in the next episode. And always, folks, let's go Canes. All right, folks, we hope you enjoyed our 3-part conversation of where the 2018-2019 Carolina Hurricanes are now. We had a lot of fun doing it. It brought back a lot of good memories for us about that run that the team went on. It's crazy to think of just how long it's been now. It's crazy, but we hope you enjoyed it, folks, because we did. Let us know what your favorite memories were for that team. Make sure you're following the show along on the socials. Myself and Andrew at Jared Ellis _96, and Andrew at A Schnitt 53, the show at LO _Hurricanes. And we'll talk to you guys in the next episode.